Support for Veterans Corner Radio is made possible by M&M Printing and the Observer News of Ruskin, Florida.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts, information for and about veterans. On this podcast, host Joe Molberger has as his guest retired Commander Paul Renner of the United States Navy. Today, you'll get to know a bit more about Commander Paul Renner. We'll learn about his time growing up as an avid player of baseball and soccer, his time in college, followed by his entry into the Navy as a surface warfare officer. Paul served on board ship during Desert Storm, then returned on July 3rd in time to celebrate Independence Day with family and friends. Continuing his service as a reserve officer, he attended law school and became an attorney in private practice while also deploying to South America and Afghanistan. Now, as a retired naval officer, Paul serves as Speaker of the House for the State of Florida Legislature. Currently, he is a candidate running to become the Governor of Florida. Here now is Joe Molberger with Veterans Corner Radio on Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts.
Welcome to Veterans Corner Radio, a show dedicated to providing information to all those who have served our country's military and to their families. Now, here is your host, combat veteran and educator, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Molberger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. I'm our host, Joe Molberger, and you are dialed in to Veterans Corner Radio. We've got like we always do, we have a wonderful veteran today that we're going to be talking with. His name is retired United States Navy Commander Paul Renner. Paul, when were you born?
1967.
That's a great
March
year.
21st.
March 21st. You're just a couple of days after my wife. This is great. Where did you grow up, though? Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
Born in Atlanta. My dad was in seminary up at Emory, and then we traveled, lived in Merritt Island, Florida, Vero Beach, Florida, then Jacksonville, Florida, and put roots down really in Jacksonville, where I would say I grew up from second grade all the way through high school, came back on active duty at Mayport Naval Station. So Jacksonville, I would say, if there's any home, it's home.
So if you're born close to a Navy base, it must have been calling you over the years. Is that what happened?
No, actually, I think that's actually fair. I think maybe if I had grown up near an Air Force base or an Army base or what have you, I would have, or a Marine Corps, a place with a lot of Marines, I would have been oriented in a different direction, perhaps. But yeah, we have Naval Station Mayport, and we also have Naval Air Station Jacksonville. So two Navy, and at the time I grew up, we also had Cecil Field, which a lot of the ships or the planes, rather, the F-14s would fly off the carrier to Cecil. Cecil closed down and became a civilian, aviation center through a BRAC. But growing up, we had three naval bases in Jacksonville, so I was surrounded by Navy. And of course, Top Gun comes out when I'm in college, and the rest is history.
So what were you doing growing up, sports-wise or academic-wise, that was part of what you were developing, church-wise maybe, that was part of your development and character as you were growing up?
Well, preacher's kid, so the church was a big part of life, and doing that certainly, and youth group and whatnot, and then sports. Did a lot of sports, baseball for many years, soccer.
Hang on, we can't run past baseball. What was your position in baseball?
Mostly second base. I also played catcher. I pitched a little bit and played some outfield, but I would say if there's a position I played the most of, it would be second base.
All right. Pretty critical position there. You're right where the deciding line is of somebody being in the scoring position or not.
Yep, going or not going. Yep.
And then catcher, you're going to tag him out if anybody is. Very nice. And then you said soccer. So what position were you in soccer?
I would say mostly halfback, but I played right wing as well. So, but halfback was probably over the years probably what I played the most of, not fullback. And I'm on the shorter side, but that was a good in between place for me. a lot of hustle and maybe not the most skilled player on the field. That's probably why. But I played forward. I played forward as well and enjoyed that. But halfback, I was out there just chasing the ball, turning it over, getting it to my guys, and feeding it in for goals.
Nice. Now, what other sports? Any others?
Well, a year of football. I played also track and field. I ran the mile, broke the record in ninth grade, but I surpassed the then record for the mile. I think it was 3:54 is what I ran, but a guy ran faster than me by a couple seconds, Mike Clare. So he holds the record there for Carolina Junior High. And I cannot run anywhere near that fast today. I can tell you that. And ran cross country as well.
You broke a 4-minute mile.
Oh, sub 5-minute mile. Yeah, I was closer to 5 minutes than 4 minutes. But yeah, I ran a sub 5-minute mile when I was in junior high school and ran cross country through 10th grade, I guess. I don't know if I ran cross country in 11th and 12th. I played soccer in 10th. I may have run cross country in 11th and 12th. I can't remember. And didn't really do anything in college. I can't really tell you why. I just tried to focus on academics when I went to college.
Now, what was it that brought you to college? What college did you go to, and what did you study when you were in college?
So I went to Davidson College, was a history major, and had really flirted with, in fact, got a nomination to the Naval Academy, but fell in love with Davidson, decided to go be a civilian in college and not pursue the military at that point. But I was interested in the Navy back then. And so when I graduated Davidson, that's when I went down to the recruiter and went the other route, which is go to officer candidate school and, be a 90-day wonder, as we call it, or 120-day wonder, I think is what it was. But as officers, young officers are often called, and I went down.
Hang on, I'm going to stop you there because the Navy does things a little different than maybe the other service components. Where nowadays, and I don't know if it was this way when you were doing it, they send a person that says, "Gee, I sure would like to go through officer candidate school through Navy." Is this right? Navy basic training, and then pull them out, and then there's a determination, and then you go to officer candidate school.
Well, that's different. Yeah, this was in 89. So I went to the recruiter, was looking to be an aviator really. And I was telling this story today I still have very good eyesight at 59, but so my eyesight was there. I'm a small guy, so I was right size to be a pilot and all that good stuff. But spatial ability, forget about it. And so, they show you pictures of planes going at different angles and whatnot. So apparently I would have flown a near priceless piece of aircraft into the mountain and killed myself and anybody with me had I been a pilot. So it was good that they screened me out, I guess. And they said, we have this great leadership opportunity called Surface Warfare Officer, and you can be a SWO. So I went that direction, and it was a program that was a 2-year active, get your surface warfare, your warfare qualifications like the aviator wings. We have our surface warfare qualifications, and then you get out and do 6 years in the selected reserves. It's called the OSAM program. Officer Sea Air Mariner, I think is what the program was called, if I'm not mistaken. It was 2 years active in your PIN, whichever comes first, and then 6 years after that. So a total of 8-year commitment. So I said, okay, I'll sign up for that. I was interested in intelligence at the time, but it wasn't open. So I did the surface warfare thing, and I enjoyed it. It was love-hate, I guess, but it was a good leadership background. I was in Desert Storm in 1991 as an active duty officer, and we can talk about that a bit, I guess. But
yeah, sure. I mean, this is about the little time in the service. What were you doing in Desert Storm? We're at the 35th anniversary of that conflict.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, as we're reflecting back, a lot of things going on this year, recognizing those people. And now in D.C., I believe along the mall, there is a memorial that's going up to that fight. So what was your aspect of the fight? Were you on board a ship somewhere, or?
I was.
What ship were you on?
I was on the USS McInerney, and what your listeners might find interesting is we, obviously on the way over, we got there because as they call it, the air war was ending, and the ground offensive into Kuwait before that commenced. So we were there. We'd operated in a carrier group for a bit. We did some boarding operations on the way over there in support of in the Red Sea and in support of the sanctions against Iraq.
Now, what are you boarding? Help the audience out. What are you boarding and what are you looking for?
boarding merchant vessels and see if the Iraqis were, transporting oil and whatever they were restricted from transporting. I was not part of that boarding team. I was the first lieutenant on the USS McInerney, which was a Perry class frigate. Carried, its main mission, its primary mission was as a submarine hunter, but in Desert Storm, it was, kind of converted as everybody is to a different mission. So we did some boarding operations in the Red Sea. The ship did. I did not personally. What I did do personally in theater was, in addition to being the officer of the deck and navigating through mine-infested waters, also as a first lieutenant, led the small boat team that carried a couple EOD members on board, and we'd go out as our ship would be, a nautical mile away, and would, once we identified those mines, those free floating mines that had broken free and they were, causing running into U.S. ships as well as merchant ships, we would go out and destroy those. The EOD team would get in the water. They put, explosives, take pictures, do all their stuff that they needed to do. We'd pull them back in the boat. And if something happened, it happened to us, not to the ship that was about a nautical mile away. So I did a lot of that. I can't remember any mines we destroyed as a small boat officer, but I did that as an ensign in the Navy. Got back after our 6-month deployment. The war was over, as you recall, very quickly. Got back on July 3rd, which was a memory that you'll never forget, manning the rails in our white uniforms right before July 4th, with our family there on the pier waiting for us. And it was a special moment. Had gotten my warfare qualifications and had applied for law school. And so I was now detached from active duty into the reserves, went to the University of Florida Law School, became a prosecutor out of law school, and kept drilling as a reservist for, 20 plus years. And of course, got mobilized 20 years later to Afghanistan.
All right, now help us non-Navy types out. You said that you were an ensign, and then you said you were a first lieutenant.
Right.
Is first lieutenant a position on board ship, but your rank was ensign?
Correct. That's right. Yeah.
What in the world is a first lieutenant on board ship?
Well, I think it's historical. Back in the day, it was more important than maybe it is today. Back in the time of sailing ships, that first lieutenant was more of an elevated position. I think more like an XO of a ship. Back in the day. In the modern Navy, it's a junior officer position. At least on the McInerney, it was, where you have the bosun's mates. You're tending to, paying the ship, maintaining, a lot of the deck, the deck work, making sure that fire stations are maintained, and in case, with salt water and everything, they're maintained and ready to go if you have a fire. Manning a repair locker. So if there's a fire on the ship or a casualty, that forward repair locker, I was, there with some of my guys to run fire hoses and do all those drills in general quarters. You maintain the ship's motor whaleboat, which is a 26-foot boat. That was the boat we were on, where we carried some EOD personnel to destroy those mines. And as the officer, the safety officer, basically on that boat, I was responsible for everybody on that motor whaleboat as we go out and destroy those mines. And the EOD guys would do that. And the first lieutenant position also is doing underway replenishment. And so, as you've seen, our ship will come alongside a fuel ship, and we would send, a shot line over, and then we would pull, the fueling, this prong is kind of male and female end into position. It locks into position, and we refuel the ship that way. As whoever is the conning officer is keeping, a safe distance, close enough but not too close to hit it, alongside you replenish your fuel alongside as you're moving. And so we did that. I did that as a conning officer, but also as the safety officer, because my guys were the ones that were doing the actual refueling work. The bosun's mates were. And so those were some of their functions. The bosun mates also function as your lookouts, your forward and aft lookouts on the bridge. And as a junior officer, you're also doing 4-hour watches. In my case, we were doing 4-hour watches on the bridge, at all hours of the day and night, while the captain and the ship, were at night, obviously, while everybody's sleeping. And that progresses you through as you learn how to fight the ship and take on the role that the captain feels like you could handle things in the event of a casualty or the event of, an attack or whatnot, to be on the bridge and be in his stead should he not be there. And those warfare qualifications are kind of going through all aspects of the ship, the engineering room, and you're doing a series of qualifications to understand every aspect of that ship in a way that the captain can say, effectively, here's the keys, and I trust you to be on the bridge at any hour and know what to do in case all hell breaks loose.
titles and ranks pretty significant, especially in a Navy that's steeped in so much tradition. Thanks so much for the clarification and for highlighting the significance of the position that you held. And when you're doing those refuelings, I understand you're going at quite a pretty fast pace. And that's part of just doing it so that it's done safely. And then you got people positioned, keeping an eye out for proper distance so that you're not running into one another. That's quite a bunch going on all at once for a guy that's an ensign, which is, the equivalent of a second lieutenant in the other service.
Right, yeah.
A lot going on there. So, all right. So you look at that and you're going, I think I could do that. Yeah, pretty good. I think I'll stick around in this reserves thing. How about some law school? So you dabble into law school. You're at you said University of Florida. So you've attached yourself to the Gator family. You became a JD, the doctorate of
Juris Doctorate. I guess is what they call it. Yeah.
So we don't call you a doctor. We call you a squire, right? Out of tradition, right?
No.
So, and that comes from British law that we all follow, which is where you get the ESC behind your name and sometimes a JD as well. So when did you graduate from law school?
94. So I got out of, Desert Storm. I went to my ship in Officer Candidate School 89, to the ship in 90 through Desert Storm. So July 3rd, we returned from Desert Storm. That war had kind of really wrapped up. We were doing some escort operations with the Egyptians and so forth out of Kuwait City to safely bring them out. This after the conflict had ceased. And I don't know if I don't think I did, Joseph, go back. I was going to make an interesting point that the McInerney was in a firing line during the ground war with the USS Wisconsin. So if you remember, Reagan brought 4 battleships back. It was the Iowa, the Wisconsin, and your listeners will know the other 2. I can't think of. He said them. I'd probably be able to say, yeah, it was those. But we were with the Wisconsin, and they were shelling the coast of Kuwait, which was something because you felt your body move. We were, probably a mile away, just up and down a firing line, back and forth as they're shelling the coast. And I mean, it shook your bones. Those big guns that were firing projectile like the size of a Volkswagen and with accuracy for miles. And so that was quite an experience. I just wanted to mention that before we moved on to law school. But law school, became a prosecutor, kept doing the reserves. At some point, we were as a reservist, I was going to South America. So my, the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks every year, the 2 weeks every year. And the run up to that was to go support a annual cruise around the continent called the Unitas Cruise that I think Kennedy had started, that is in part military operations within respective navies. So we'll go with the Brazilian Navy, and then we pick up, the Argentine or the Uruguayan or Argentine Navy, and we go all the way around. The ships go all the way around. I was on the ships. I went into the embassies for that 2 week period to get ready for the ships to come in and do all the kind of the legwork, logistics work for them that they needed done. We would do community relations projects, charitable work. And so I'd find out, okay, what does this charity need? Or this, say, an orphanage needs some toilets fixed or some walls painted. And the guys would come off the ship and do a really nice thing for that community. They'd do some medical donations, variety of different things. And then coming out, if somebody had to go back with a sick loved one or a wife who's having a baby, we'd get them out on emergency leave. All those things through the embassy is what I would do during my 2 week duty, and did that for 7 or 8 years, maybe 6 or 7 years. I can't remember which, but throughout many countries in Latin America. And then along the way, had an opportunity to move over to intelligence, and I did intelligence for the balance of whatever that works out to be.
Paul, come on. You can't tell us that you kept going south of the equator and you were not on board a ship and go through becoming, what is it, a shellback? Did you
a shellback? Yeah,
that opportunity? This is the Navy steeped in history.
When we went to Desert Storm, it had to be Desert Storm because I flew to Afghanistan. Desert Storm, it was an operational thing. Had we had the time, I think they would have done that. We'd have gone through that whole shellback ceremony, which I've not been through, but I've certainly heard about it. And maybe it was good I didn't. But we needed to get to theater, and on the way back, we actually had an opportunity for some, port stays in Palma, Mallorca, some nice, kind of R&R on the way back from that war. And the ship actually took a vote, like, do you want to go spend a few days here? Or do you want to get back home and see your family? The ship overwhelmingly, all the guys said, I was only guys back then. We said, let's get home and see our family. That got us home on July 3rd. And I'm glad we voted that way. And, I can see Palma de Mallorca some other time.
Made it for a great 4th of July then, huh?
It sure did.
Wow. So, okay, prosecuting, you stuck it out in the Navy. Did you become a JAG or did you stick it out in the intelligence field?
No. Yeah, never a lawyer. That's the interesting part. I was surface warfare, as I said, and keep your warfare qualifications, but the intel folks want warfare qualified officers, aviators, submarine, surface warfare. And I'm sure it's probably the same in the Army and the other branches. So I went over to the intel. We had a security officer who was in the intel, and so our unit that I was in, that Comsolent unit, moved from Jacksonville to Rosie Roads, Puerto Rico, which is where the Comsolent, the Commander South Atlantic Force, resides, or did reside, at least back then. And I wasn't going to travel to Puerto Rico every month, 1 weekend a month. So he said, hey, we got some spots in intel. I was interested in intel, as I mentioned, coming out of college. So it was a natural thing. So I did what's called a change of designator and went over to intel and had a great time doing some, real world stuff. We're on a weekend where you come in on a, they believe on a Friday, we come in on a Saturday, Sunday and pick up, whatever that might be, country briefs and, things we can talk about that intel officers do. My role was more on the human side as things transpired, and then got mobilized into Afghanistan and led a human unit over there to stop foreign fighters from coming into Afghanistan to kill Americans, essentially.
So were you one of the guys running around with long hair and a big old beard?
Nope.
No.
I know those guys. I did work with those guys, but I was not that guy. And we traveled a bit, but we were mainly in Bagram and doing, the stuff we were doing, because that was where we were drawing our intel was there. And so did that for almost a year. And, again, one of those, love, hate, the military, it's like a love, hate. There's times when like, what am I doing? It's like long hours, you're away from your family, you're in a war, but you look back and say, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm so proud to have and privileged to have been able to serve with my colleagues and at that time it was a joint task force. So I was in what we called the NARMY. So I went to Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina. I went to Fort Bragg on my way over, had Army camis, and then this joint task force, a lot of Air Force guys that worked in my unit. And so we kind of jokingly called it the NARMY for those Navy guys that were mostly with an Army unit, a lot of Rangers over there. And it was a great experience and great to serve with my colleagues in the other branches of service. And it was a great unit to be in.
So have you retired from?
I did.
Okay. So when did you retire from the Navy?
2013. People say, I said, yeah, I liked it. How you going to know when you retire? And they say, you'll know. And there was a point at which, I was leaving my law practice, back in my law practice, because I was mobilized out as a partner in a law firm doing business law and whatnot. And, enjoyed it, but I was traveling to, Millington, Tennessee in my last unit. And, it got to the point you're leaving on a Friday and clients are looking for you and you're coming back tired on a Sunday and you go right into work. It was a point at which in life, and I was about to get married, it's like, it's time to go ahead and hang my cleats up. And I'd done my 23 years. I was a 05, a commander of the Navy, and it was the right time. And it felt right to leave at that point, so I did. And retired with my 20 plus years in the military, and that's it. And I still keep in touch with a lot of the guys.
So we're recording. It's April. It's 2026. This interview will go on forever and ever and ever, and be available for folks. You have dabbled in politics in the state of Florida. Tell us a little bit about where that has taken you and what are you up to for, like, what's new or next on the horizon?
Well, I was one of the leaders in the legislature with Governor DeSantis as the Speaker of the House. So that's the guy that leads, presides over the House of Representatives there, and kind of was an architect of building what we call the free state of Florida here in the state, and proud to have done that. And now running to replace Governor DeSantis as governor in the August 18th primary, and just, pointing people to a lifetime of leadership under pressure in the military, obviously as a prosecutor, and then getting results done. It's what people expect out of their elected leaders is showing up and less talk, more action. As veterans appreciate, focusing on the mission. A lot of people in politics are caught up in their own ego and arrogance and fighting over this or that thing that doesn't really matter and not focusing on we the people. And so as veterans, we understand what mission's all about. I focused on the mission, and I think that's why we were so productive, and so hope to do the same thing. I would be the third naval officer if elected after Rick Scott, Ron DeSantis, both naval officers. I'd be the third one in a row here in Florida and the third veteran, obviously, in a row. And so hopefully we'll get victory on August 18th and go on to win the general and represent Florida. And it'd be a privilege to represent all your listeners that are Florida residents as your next governor.
Wow, that's something. So you were Speaker of the House after now Governor DeSantis had held the position of Speaker of the House?
No, he was always governor. I was in the legislature on my way to becoming speaker those last 2 years. And so we were together for 6 of the 8 years. And I was speaker for the 2 years that he recently called unmatched and the most consequential 2 years of any legislature in any place in America, is what he said, which is a nice compliment. And, that I deserve credit for having been the leader during that period of time. And so we're just going to try to duplicate that.
What was that period of time, so our listeners know?
22 to 24. So,
okay.
So I got elected in 2015, and in the whole caucus, the Republican caucus, we was in the majority. In this case, the Republican caucus has to choose who's going to lead this chamber in those last 2 years, because we have term limits. So I was term limited out in 2024. They selected me, and so I ran that chamber and helped guide a lot of the legislation that we passed during that period of time in those last 2 years, 22 to 24, and then termed out in 24. Stop being the speaker, stop being a member of the legislature. And of course, the governor still has 2 more years left, last year and this year. And then whoever gets elected in 26 will take over in 27 for the next 48 years. And so after a lot of reflection on who's in and not in, I decided to go ahead and jump into that race because I believe I've got the leadership background and, again, leadership under pressure from the military to get after the mission, get after problems, do what people expect people to do when they get elected, which is solve people's problems and do what they promise to do when they campaign.
Imagine that. Well, here on Veterans Corner Radio, we say that our veterans are worth their value in gold. You certainly exceeded that multiple times. And as you're making that run for the governorship of Florida, we wish you all the very best of success as you're heading towards that goal. And we look forward to hearing more about you, Paul Renner. Ladies and gentlemen, here on Veterans Corner Radio, we have been listening to a meeting retired United States Navy Commander Paul Renner, who is now heading for the run-up to the election of governor of Florida. Well, congratulations, sir, and we wish you all the very best. And thank you for your time, and thank you for your service, especially on the 35th anniversary of Desert Shield and Desert Storm, where you served.
Thank you, and best to all the veterans out there. Thank you for your service. I'm proud of everyone that wore the uniform, and those that are still wearing the uniform, keep it up. We love you.
You've been listening to Veterans Corner Radio with your host, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Muhlberger. The views expressed on this program are those of Joe and his guests and our opinions based on the best available information. In matters of law or governmental regulation, it will always be best to check with the appropriate agency. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next program on Veterans Corner Radio.
Here's a quick final thought. If you're enjoying these podcasts, why not take a minute to subscribe or mark Veterans Corner Radio as a favorite? It's easy, and you'll be set to be among the first to find out when new podcasts are published. And thanks again for listening to Veterans Corner Radio.